and opinions expressed on this show are solely those of the host and guest and are not necessarily supported by WPSC 88.7 FM, station management, or the station owner, William Patterson University. Anyone wanting to offer differing opinions may do so by calling the show at 973-720-2738. Abusive callers will be rejected. Now here's your program on WP 88.7 FM Brave New Radio.
Well, good morning, good morning. Good morning to you. And this is your host, Marc Medley, and we're ready and we're here. We're together for another edition of the Reading Circle with Marc Medley. We come to you live each Saturday morning from 6 o'clock a.m. until where we bring you what's going on in the literary world. This morning, I opened the show up with a song titled Sierra Hotel, and my guest will automatically resonate with that title for a special reason. And she's on the line. I'm going to get her introduced shortly. But again, that's Sierra Hotel playing in the background that I opened up with this morning. Those of you who listen anytime, if you've listened to me anytime, or if you know me, you know I am in. I'm trying to think of how big the word I want to use in terms of enormous, or what word I want to use to describe how big I am a fan or an enthusiast of aviation. And I mean, in terms of, I've flown a Cessna. I fly all the time on simulators. I travel every now and again, but I'm just fascinated with flight, just fascinated with aviation. So the guest that I have this morning is a very good friend of mine. She was on the show some years ago when she wrote maybe second or third book, might have been the first one, I'm not sure. But now she's continued to expand the series, and we're going to talk about that. So I'm going to go ahead and do what I normally do, which is read from two books. Then I'm going to share the weather with you. Actually, I do it in the other order. I share the weather first, read the two books, introduce my guest, share some information with you, and then the interview commences. So I need you to get on all your social media sites and let someone know that the Reading Circle is indeed on the air on gobrave.org and WP 88.7 FM. So this is what's going on weather-wise here in the northern New Jersey area. Right now we're at 25.8 degrees. We have periods of rain and snow today, a high of 39, low of 32. Then tonight snow will taper off and end this evening, but skies will remain cloudy late. 70% chance of snow, but the snow accumulations are less than 1 inch. Tomorrow, Sunday, a few passing clouds. Otherwise, generally sunny, high of 41, low of 28. Then on Monday, sunshine, high of 49, low of 36. Tuesday, partly cloudy skies, 52 is a high, 28 is a low, generally fair on Tuesday night. Then on Wednesday, except for a few clouds, mainly sunny, high of 32, low of 16. By that time, we will have crossed over into spring. All right, reading from our two books, the weather brought to you by the WP 88.7 FM Weather Center. From the book, The Power of Being Thankful, 365 Devotions, dealing with the power of gratitude. March 18th, resting in God. We can be thankful that we don't have to worry about things, figure out everything, or carry heavy burdens in our lives. It is actually quite refreshing and something to be grateful for, to realize that I don't need to have all the answers to my problems. We need to get comfortable with saying, I don't know the answer to this dilemma, and I'm not going to worry about anything because God is in control and I trust Him. I'm going to rest in Him. When we're overloaded with the cares of life, struggling, laboring, and worrying, we need a mental and emotional vacation. Our minds need to rest from thinking about how to take care of problems, and our emotions need to rest from being upset. Worry isn't restful at all. In fact, it steals rest and the benefits of rest from us. So next time you feel you are carrying a heavy load in your mind or you find yourself worried and anxious, remember you can put your trust in God and enjoy His rest. Our prayer of thanks for the morning. Father, I am grateful that you give me rest. Thank you that I don't have to have all the answers all the time. I can trust in you and live a life of peace, contentment, and rest. That's from the book, The Power of Being Thankful, 365 Devotions with the Power of Gratitude. And that's by Joyce Meyer. The second book I read from the Kick to Show Off is Until Today by Iyanla Vanzant. For March 18th, she says, I open my heart and mind to be aware. I have allowed what others believe about me to become what I believe about myself. If you tell yourself something long enough, you will believe it. If you fail to take the time to question why you do what you do, you can become convinced that you cannot do anything else. Other people will help you stay convinced. People are in the habit of telling other people who they are. They tell you who they expect you to be, who they need you to be, and who they want you to be. If you listen to people about who you are, you may realize you cannot be yourself because you have been somebody else for so long. How can you be yourself and still please your parents? How can you be yourself and meet the demands of the world around you? How much of what you do is what is expected of you? How can you figure out how much of you is them? Well, needless to say, it ain't easy, but there is a way. When you can be happy with yourself and what you do without feeling guilty about it, your parents will be pleased. When you negotiate the salary you believe you are worth having, you will be excited about going to work. When you can resist the tendency to control your children, you will be the parent that every child needs. When you are willing to accept yourself without believing that you have to be right all of the time, everybody will want to marry you. When you open your heart and allow people to see you exactly as you are, you will attract more friends than you will know what to do with. If, on the other hand, you are defending the reasons, holding on to the excuses, offering explanations for why you are the way you are, you may never know the truth of your being. Until today, you may not have been aware of your true identity. You may have accepted the expectations of others as the fabric of your being. Just for today, stand in your true identity without guilt, defenses, or apologies. Today, I'm devoted to finding out exactly who I am. And that's from Until Today by Iyanla Vanzant. The background music playing now, title of that one is Wheels Up. Another one my guest will connect with. I told you I'm big into aviation, so a couple of the songs on the CD are aviation related in terms of their titles. Without further ado, I'm going to let you know who my guest is. Like I said, she's no stranger to the Reading Circle microphones, and it is none other than Karlene Petitt. Karlene is a wife of 36 years, mother of 3 gorgeous daughters, grandmother of Kadence, Miles, Khoyn, and she'll give me the correct way of saying it whenever we talk in a couple of minutes, Carter, Ellis, Anthony, Hayden, and Becket. A pilot for 8 airlines, 7 type ratings, 2 master's degrees, and author of Aviation Thrillers, Flight for Control, Flight for Safety, Flight for Survival, and the latest one that I'm in the midst of reading is Flight for Sanity. Our motivation, flight to success, be the captain of your life. Children's I Am Awesome, ABCs of Being Me. After closing one chapter of my career flying the 747-400 with Northwest Airlines, I've opened the next 3 chapters. I was flying the Airbus A330 for Delta Airlines, but now waiting for training on the B777 or the 777. She's working toward a PhD, which I think she already has. Some of this I'm reading from her blog, and she can update as we talk. In aviation at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, she passed her qualifying exams in August of 2016. Welcome back to the Reading Circle microphone, Karlene Petitt. Karlene, good morning.
Good morning, Mark. How you doing?
I am doing well, thanks. Thrilled to have you back on here because there's a combination of things that we're going to talk about. in terms of your writing and the combination of things that you do, the PhD, the writing, the piloting, the grandmothering, the mothering. We're going to talk a little bit about all of that while we have you on the line. So those of you in the listening audience, you know the deal. I'm going to go ahead and share a public service announcement with you. And when we come back, Karlene and I are going to begin talking about all of her work, because she has a whole series. As you just heard me read, Flight for Control, Flight for Safety, Flight for Survival, Flight for Sanity. Now, you all know I'm a wordsmith and I love to play on words. At first blush, when you look at the cover, you might think that says Fight for Control, Fight for Safety, Fight for Survival, Fight for Sanity, even though the word is flight. It's a very nice play on words. So we're going to talk a little bit about that when we come back as well. So don't you dare move unless you are getting up to call somebody and tell them to listen in to GoBrave.org or WP 88.7 FM.
Hey everyone, let's all stop what we're doing and take a moment. You see? Every moment can be kind of special. But they can be loud moments, goofy moments, dorky moments, it doesn't matter. Because every time dads like us take a moment like that to spend with our kids, well, it's pretty momentous. So let's take a moment to make a moment. Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
I really didn't feel safe anymore at home.
Every year, tens of thousands of youth experience homelessness.
The possibility of sleeping out on a park bench, it's not something that a 15-year-old should have to think about.
1-800-RUNAWAY provides 24-hour access to a nationwide network of housing and support services.
I felt such warmth. I felt comfort. I felt safe.
Call 1-800-RUNAWAY. Go to 1-800-RUNAWAY.org or text 66008. We can end youth homelessness.
All right, we are up to the point now. We're ready to begin our interview. So again, Karlene, good morning. Listening audience, Karlene's calling out of Texas. Normally she would be calling, if she was home, it would be on the West Coast, where she would be 3 hours behind us over in Seattle. But she is in Texas visiting with her grandchildren. So she's only an hour behind us, which is still early. It's 6:17 here, so it's 5:17 there. Again, Karlene, good morning and welcome to you. So talk to me a little bit about, we're going to kind of like do a little bit historical very quickly. Where did this all begin? Where did it begin in terms of you wanting to be a pilot? Was that something like a childhood dream? And then we'll work our way into how you became an author.
Okay, you know, Mark, that to become a pilot, I never knew anyone who were pilots. And it started from a game called Careers, where you could be a hostess. That's for all the new generation, that's today's flight attendant. You could be a hostess, a librarian, a school teacher, a nurse. And all my girlfriends, and probably myself, you know, this 9-year-old peer pressure, wanted to get on the hostess spot. Well, they all did, and I couldn't get on it. And he'd spin the wheel, and I could not get on that spot. So finally I just said, I don't care, I'm going to be the pilot. And my girlfriend said, you can't be a pilot. And I said, why not? And she says, because girls can't do that. And I said, yes, they can. She says, no, they can't. My dad's a pilot. He says they can't do it. And so we had this, yes, you can, no, you can't. I finally kicked him out of the house. I said, I'm going to be a pilot. You know, and I went up and asked my mom if I could be a pilot. And she said, you can do anything you want, you know, kind of, then get out of the kitchen. I've got to make dinner. But it was that point that I decided, who is going to tell me I can't do something?
Right.
And, you know, and then fast forward to, you know, at 90, I started babysitting and mowing lawns and earning every bit of money I could because I knew taking flying lessons was going to take money. So I saved all my money. And then at 16 years old, I went out for my, I think it was like, you know, I forget, $10 or $15 introductory flight. And the moment we broke ground, I thought, wow, they're going to pay me to do this. And I was hooked. You know, so that's kind of how it started. And then talk about facing adversity and challenges. And, you know, I've gone through 8 airlines now with bankruptcies and mergers. And I also wanted to have a family. And so when I met my husband, you know, it's like sometimes we have to alter our plans a little bit.
Right.
When you know, life puts that our love match in front of us or something, you know, it's like, you know, that perfect job opportunity or just something. And so my husband and I looked at each other and I thought, if we're going to have a family, because he's a little bit older than I am, and I thought, maybe we need to do college kids, and then when they get into school and start flying. Because my original plan was to go off to college, get all the degrees, all the ratings, and put off having that family till later in life. And, and I'm sure all your listeners, we have all decided at some point in our life we're going to put something off till later in life because, we make these excuses why we're not going to do it. And many of them are very valid, but sometimes we never end up doing what we say we're going to do because it keeps getting put off.
That's correct.
And so I ended up having just a wonderful family and just pulled them into aviation, and they, a supportive husband beyond belief to stick with me through this whole, crazy career. We'll call it a crazy career because, as you know, with mergers and bankruptcies and furloughs and airlines stripping pensions away from the pilots, it's been a challenge. It's one of those things that you love so much. If you have, you have that passion in your soul for aviation. It's something that we get hooked on. So I don't have my doctorate yet. I'm actually a doctoral candidate. I finished the coursework, so I'm working on it. And interestingly enough, I'm focusing on this training issue, but I added something into my factors, into my factor analysis, and we'll see what they say, the professors, when they look at this, because I'm actually adding AvGeek. And an AvGeek, and trying to describe what an AvGeek is,
right.
That person with so much passion, because I really think these airline pilots who have that within them, they're bringing that to their career. They're bringing that into training, and we're doing everything so much is self-taught today. We're not, talk about what I got 35 years ago for training compared to, now.
Right.
We're self-training. And so if you have that passion and that zest, that love, you're going to go get more. And so I'm really thinking this could be a factor. So I'm going to be looking into that. So I might have the first dissertation with AvGeek. We'll find out. always breaking into new territory.
Well, even with sharing your story about, because at the time you were coming through, there weren't that many female pilots, and the fact that we're in March and Women's History Month, this interview is very appropriate because you were really at that point in the groundbreaking area as well, because again, they were like the little girl said, my dad said, and not to mention that there weren't many female pilots, but that attitude of, we don't want female pilots here from the men. So, you broke ground there. And then as you move through and you got your different ratings and everything, and for those of you listening, I fly on the simulator, and I can tell you each plane reacts differently. Matter of fact, Karlene, interestingly enough, I've worked my way to the 747-400. That's what I've been practicing on over the last couple of weeks or so. That's a very sensitive aircraft in terms of keeping the airspeed so that it won't stall and so forth and so on, because it's so big. The wingspan is so large. And so like when you get into the Airbus 320s and 330s, it flies a little bit differently from the 747s. So you have to get rated in each one of the different aircraft that you fly. And even that takes on like retraining. And so when you just heard Karlene talk about AvGeek, with a lot of pilots now being self-trained, they're kind of, for the most part, doing the same thing that I'm telling you I'm doing. They're on simulators, and then they get to the airlines. And now from what I'm understanding, especially after reading your series of books, is training is either cut back or either it's minimal. A lot of it is done automated or what have you. And that could cause issues.
Yeah, and that's really the essence of my hypothesis and what I'm researching right now. And actually, in the book that you're reading right now, The Fight for Sanity, the research that my investigator's doing is actually the research I'm doing for my dissertation, because what's happened in this entire industry has been enabled by our regulatory officials, is that they think the more automated the aircraft is, the less that we have to know. And in actuality, it's opposite. We should know more.
Right.
We should understand what's going behind. When I started, I had to draw the electrical system and draw the hydraulic system, and I was a molecule there and went through the engine, had to know where it went and came out. And today we just memorize facts. And I don't think, if you don't have a thorough understanding, we can all memorize a fact.
Right.
What something does. But if we don't know why why it's doing what it's doing. Then when it breaks, we're going to fumble and we're going to have a problem. And that's a challenge. You're going to love this. I'm actually working on another children's book called Jungle Air, which I hope to be a movie. For anyone who's watched Utopia, it's going to, similar to that feel to it. But in it, I have a line in this where the little monkeys are telling, the little tiger gets to come fly the airplane, and they're telling her, push the button, be the monkey, get the banana. And, it's because she's not supposed to know about this airplane. She's supposed to push those buttons. And the irony of that is an actual instructor told a captain that on an A330. Push the button, be the monkey, get the banana. Stop asking questions or you're not going to pass through. Yeah, and we laugh at it, but it's like, oh my gosh, this is where we have gone. Stop asking questions, just, push those buttons. And so I have a very deep passion for training. I instructed for 21 years on wide-body jets, and I love it. I love teaching and learning and what's going on behind the scenes, and why some of us learn the way we learn and why we do what we do. And that actually brought me to the first book, The Flight for Control, because I was watching what was happening in the industry and the changing of the flight hours. It really was a random decision. We shouldn't say it's random, because the reason they said they changed to 1,500 hour pilots need 1,500 hours to get their ATP, therefore impacting this pilot shortage. But it was. I think there's too many people behind the scenes that are just making legislation, maybe, that they don't understand from a pilot perspective what's needed, and they don't have the inside and the outside perspective, the academic. How do people learn? What's happening? Then we have the safety side. What happens to, when you start chipping away at a career?
Right.
Basically the theme of it, how far can you break an industry before you break the pilots? And sadly, here we had German wings crash, 4 years after the book.
Right. Well, that's interesting, because I remember one time there was something real world that happened that was just so similar to the book. And I remember texting you or tweeting you or something saying, oh my God, this was a scene out of the book, and it was real life. But what I'm hearing, from a comparison standpoint, to make it very real for the audience to understand what Karlene is talking about, the way I'm interpreting it is almost as if it's the difference between learning how to do math with and without the calculator. And the way children now in school, they have the technology that they don't necessarily have to know the mathematical concepts, because all they have to do, as she just said, in terms of hitting the button, tell the monkey punch the button, get the banana. All the kid has to do is put the numbers in the calculator, and the calculator does all the work. But they don't know the theory behind it. So it's almost better. Look, kid, it's better for you to learn your multiplication tables first, then get the calculator. That's what I'm hearing here in terms of with the piloting thing now, in terms of, okay, you got the automation, you got the technology, you don't really necessarily have to know the theory behind it. But that's a fallacy, and I can tell you why, because she's right. If something goes awry, the pilot needs to know what to do. And the only way you really know what to do is to know the theory and the systems and everything that goes about it. Because, again, playing on the simulator, I've put the thing on autopilot and just kind of turned my head, and before you knew it, something else was going on. And now you're sitting there scrambling like, what do I do next? In real life, in the air, that can't be a scramble. That has to be intuitive of what to do when something goes awry. So that's why the training piece and the practice piece is so important. Am I far off with that?
Oh, no, you're right on with that. And take it even one step forward. Think about the little kids who used to know how to tie a shoe and get their fingers and loop the little loops around. Now they do Velcro.
Right.
So click it and pull it off. Even a clock, they used to have a concept of how those the second hand went around, and the minute hand and the hour hand, and now they can look at numbers, but does it really have an understanding of that, of the passage of time? So yeah, we're changing how we do things, and not necessarily for the best.
Right. And I see the same thing in education. I mean, in fact, interesting enough, that's almost like my mantra. There are some things, the basics that we've thrown out that really in the long run is going to cost us. I mean, I know Okay, I was sharing this with some teachers the other day. Because we're in the technological age, the expectation curriculum-wise is that you will get a kid to the level of where technology is. Unfortunately, and I'm with that, at some point they got to get there. But unfortunately, like we were just saying, you're not giving them the foundation. And that's what I'm getting out of listening and talking to you and reading your books is the pilots, and I don't want to say it this way necessarily, but it's almost as if it's the same phenomenon going on. They're not getting the foundational skills, but the expectation is they're going to be at this high level. So how do you, it's almost like having a table that you've cut the legs off. How do you expect the table to stand at a certain height when the legs aren't there?
I know. Well, if you have a good support system and have it propped up and you can have it, it'll hold. But not forever because things do break.
Correct.
And that's the whole shift in our, but here's the thing, it's like, and I can see this coming because there's this perception that, then you know what we need to do if pilots aren't, getting trained, we need to have this automation and control these airplanes from the ground because human error will cause accidents, aircraft accidents. But if we do it on the ground, we'll be fine. And I'm talking drone technology. But
right.
The problem with that is there's going to be human error on the ground too.
Correct.
And I would much rather have my life vested in my pilot's hand if my pilot is on the airplane with me than if they're sitting on the ground somewhere, because we're going to have a whole new generation of issues when we go down that path. And part of the reason I am educating myself and working towards this foundation is because I want to be there when these decisions are made to remove. We don't only need 4 pilots, we only need 3 because there's a pilot shortage and it's economic and we can't cancel these flights. We got to keep these planes moving and we just don't have enough pilots because we have created this 1,500 hour rule and now nobody wants to get into it because it's very expensive to get 1,500 hours when you can't get hired to get them.
Right.
And so now what are we going to do? And, we'll just kick a pilot out of the cockpit. We don't need 4 anymore. We just need 3. Oh, we don't need 3 anymore. We just need 2 because the technology is so great. And that's what I want to do. I want to be the pilot and actually the passenger's advocate for safety. And, that is the core of what I'm doing because I do have a very deep understanding of where we were, where
right.
we are and where we are going to.
Right.
And I get it and I see what they're doing and I know why they're doing it, but I also see the ramifications of what could happen. And, people who say, don't worry about what happened. I really enjoyed your lines about the worry because if you go to Google or go word search worry on my blog, I have probably half a dozen or more posts on why we shouldn't worry because it's wasted energy and it's a wasted time. But worry and concern, I had this discussion with somebody recently. Worry and concern are 2 different things in my life.
Right.
Worry is something that we just sit and ruminate over and we have this great angst in it and it comes into our body. But when we have a concern for something and we proactively do everything we can and we've done everything we can, then that's all we can do, and there's no need to worry about it.
Right. That is true. And the aviation industry, I don't think is the only industry going through this. It's because I see it parallel in education, and it is scary. I mean, at the end of the day, the bottom line is it comes down to the almighty dollar. Once again, we're a capitalistic society. I get that. I understand that. But in far too many instances, in most instances, if not all of them, profit is over people. And a lot of this is connected with that because I notice not only do you deal with the whole training issue, you also deal with fatigue. Right. Pilot fatigue. And for the average, and see, again, I love flight. For me, just being in the airport, just being around airplanes, as my wife calls it, because she teaches travel and tourism, she calls the airlines the sexy industry. That's the sexy industry. I mean, you all walk through the airports in your uniforms and you have the caps on and you have your flight bags and you are the person that commands this big piece of equipment. And it's just, the flight attendants and everything about it is just something mysterious for people. But in general, people, when they step on a plane, they step on there confidently knowing that that person is going to take me to my destination from point A to point B. And they're not really giving a thought to the things that you're making people aware of in terms of the training issues and the fatigue issues and everything else that goes on behind the scenes. And so there is a need to make folks aware so that changes can be made, that'll help everybody. Because nobody, you know the stats just like I do in terms of, from a safety perspective, there are more people that lose their lives in car accidents every year than airplanes. We know. But like anything else, when a plane goes down, more lives are lost in one shot than all the little car accidents or whatever. So the fact that you're talking, in the airline industry, we call them souls. You're talking 500, 600, 700 souls might be on a flight, or 150 souls on a flight. That's all lost in one shot. So the things that Karlene are talking about, they are real. And she weaves it nicely into her series of books, because the main character is Darby Bradshaw. I tell you, I feel like I know Darby.
Yep, she's definitely a fun one. Everybody's friend, yeah. So and then Catherine and
Catherine, that's right.
Yeah. And then we have Jackie. We have a new adventure for her too. So yeah, these and interestingly, I think we talked before because everybody wanted to know which character, are you in this book, Karlene? Who are you? And my joke at the very beginning, when Flight for Control came out, because Darby gets have all the fun. I said, and then Catherine's the one who's more into analytical and researching, investigating, and then Jackie is the one that wants to be the stay-at-home mom and bake the cookies type of thing. And I used to say, the family side of me is the Jackie flight attendant. All my girlfriends think that I'm Catherine, and I said, and everybody I fly with hopes to heck that I'm Darby. She's the fun one, and as you know through the series, they kind of change role. The first one is Catherine; she's kind of the lead, and Darby was the sidekick. And then the second one, it turned into Darby's book because it got into training and flight things, and then the third novel was kind of both of them, and now we're really back to a shared story between them, parallel journeys of what's happening behind the scenes down the FAA side and the regulatory side, and then what's happening down the airline side and how they're impacting each other, sometimes not for the best,
Now, Flight for Survival was prior to Sanity, right?
Let's see, it's Flight for Control,
right?
Then Flight for Safety,
right?
Then Survival, Survival. Now Sanity.
So you almost got me in Survival, and I won't let on because I want the reading audience, I want the listening audience to read the book, so I won't let on. But you almost got me in Flight to Survival.
Yes, and this is why the reading audience should read them in sequence. However, if they wanted to pick up Flight for Sanity and then go, okay, how did we get to this point in this life? And then they can jump back to the beginning and get caught up without issue. But because the memory is short when you're reading books sometimes, isn't it?
But yeah, I'm reading there and I get all the way to the end. I'm like, okay, but you almost got me there. But if you've just joined us, my guest is Karlene Petitt. And her series of books is Flight for Control, Flight for Safety, Flight for Survival, Flight for Sanity, and Flight to Success. And again, they are thrillers. So if you love mysteries, you love drama, you love aviation, they are a perfect combination. But at the same time,
they're not really. It's like a thriller, Mark. Some people think that thriller they're peeling the skin off bodies and doing
no, not that kind of thing. They're clip. You keep reading to see what's going to happen next. That's what I mean. In terms of an author, that's exactly what you want. You want your reader to keep coming back. Your books I really read relatively quickly. I usually get to because I can't put it down. I want to see what's going to happen to Darby next, what's going to happen to Catherine next, what's going to happen to John next. At this point, I'm at the point now where I'm still trying to figure. I think it's John with the FAA lady. I'm trying to think of her name.
With Catherine. It's
not Catherine. It's the other. Not, okay. Well, who's the other person? Who's the character in Sanity who's trying to get elected?
Oh, we're talking about. You must be talking about Noble.
Noble is the president at the moment, I think. But who is the lady? Who is the lady?
Yeah, that is Diane Noble.
Yes, Diane Noble.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Diane Noble. Her. That's right. So I'm trying to figure out this thing between her and John, I believe. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's
they're vying for that
for the same position.
And
yes.
Yeah. So for all the readers, they're both vying to become the Department of Transportation secretary.
That's it. They're trying to DOT secretary. That's it. So I'm watching that whole thing play out, and I know they have the baby, and so they're very good reasons. I'm not going to tell you, and I'm just giving you I'm just trying to whet your appetite. But you read it from the standpoint of, oh my God, I want to see who's going to happen next. What's going to happen next? And that's when I say thriller. That's the type of, now we're not talking gore and murder, even though there is a little tinge of that in there. But it's interesting to see the corporate structure, because what Karlene hits in is not only in flight, but also, as I said, as you go up the corporate ladder. Because again, not many people, when they're thinking of airlines, they're generally not thinking of the corporate office. They're thinking of the plane and the pilot itself. They're not thinking of all the the VPs and the presidents and the CEOs and the this, that, and the other. And you get into that in all of the books, actually, one way or the other. Right.
And you know, the really sad thing about, I shouldn't say sad thing, it's an interesting thing, but, every time I start I get into another book and I start conducting research, what's happening to Darby is actually happening to pilots at multiple airlines right now. And we're not going to tell I don't want to give too much away for the book, but this new form of retaliation, because, and I do education too, because we all know that you can't fire somebody for reporting safety issues.
Right.
Okay. And they created a new law called the Air 21, which is the whistleblower law, and which is supposed to support this. Support the pilot, the mechanic, anyone who sees that there's an issue and can come forward. But sadly, that law appears to be written for the airlines. And unfortunately, there's some retaliation that airlines are doing to pilots now because they report safety, that they're not firing them. They're just moving them down into another realm. And they're actually pulling these pilots out and destroying their careers and their lives with this new tactic. And it's disheartening. It's to the pilots that I have met that have been going through this for 2, 3, 4, 5 years now. Actually, one of them, and I shouldn't say new tactic, because during my research I found one pilot who went through this and 20 years ago, and sadly with the same doctor who is today running around doing the same thing to pilots today. But this guy went through 20 years. 20 years he has been going into court and running it all the way up the Supreme Court. And if you read these case briefs and the summary judgments, you can clearly see that the court system is more favorable to the economics of the airline than they are to an individual pilot also.
Because, see, again, like I said earlier, at the end of the day, it comes down to the bottom line, which is money. That's at the end of the day. So when you start now bringing up safety issues, because most of the time, whenever any industry for that matter starts cutting corners, it's to save $1 or to make $1. So now you and anybody that's advocating for, well, you know what, I get it, but we need to be safe. And if in order to be safe, it's cost you an extra $1 per whatever it is that you need to do, then that's what we need to do. That's why you're getting like the pushback, because again, we need to save this $1. We need to make more profit. And in order to do that, we have to cut this corner. And once you now start making an issue out of this, then, it's easier for us to, as you say, downgrade you or destroy your career than to have to pay out this extra money. But again, when it's all said and done, it's all about money, which is, I've had guests on the show the last couple of weeks. We were talking, I had a doctor on a couple of weeks ago, actually, and from Texas, by the way. He was calling out of that Houston area. No, he was calling out of Sugar Land, because we were talking about the whole diabetes and heart disease. The very industries that you would think that are about life and saving lives really are not. The very industry, such as the food industry, the pharmaceutical industry, and other industries, on surface, you would think these industries are for saving lives, when the truth of the matter is they're not. They're for money as well. Well, the same thing I see here in terms of, again, as a passenger, I just want to get to my destination safely. So the thinking would be, I know that whatever airline I'm to, they're doing everything they can to ensure my safety. Then there are folks that advocates and folks who experience on the other side, like yourself and others, that are saying, that might be a nice show. But this is the real deal.
Well, exactly, and they assume that the regulatory bodies are overseeing these airlines and making sure they're doing it. In reality, the airlines appear to be doing exactly what they want, and for financial reasons, and because of that, they're able to tell the regulatory bodies how they're going to do it, and they're being allowed to do whatever they want.
Because they're so large. That's like the lobbyists down in Washington. That's why the whole political thing is like, you'll always have lobbyists down there. That's why that's the job. That's the lobbyist job.
Hey, did you ever watch that movie Concussion?
I haven't, but I'll have to look it up.
Oh, now. It's so powerful, and Will Smith is in this.
Oh, that's right. That came out last year. It's about the football.
Yeah.
Yes, I heard. I didn't see it yet.
Oh, really powerful. He's telling him, just do the right thing, and there's so much passion there. And I can't tell you how many times I'm looking at these people and just wanting to yell at them, just do the right thing, do it. And one interesting thing, they came in and they all knew what was going on, but you know what they said? They said the football, NFL owns a day of the week. This is the power you're dealing with.
Right.
It owns a day of the week. Imagine what the airlines own, because we fly 24/7. 24/7, 7 days a week. So if an industry can own 1 day a week and be that powerful, imagine what is going on in the airline industry. It's huge. It's huge. And you know what? Here's the thing. As you mentioned, that flying is so safe. It really is. And we're putting responsible people in that airplane. And you could actually, in a modern aircraft, put somebody who doesn't know what they're doing and just teach them what buttons to push. And as long as the airplane, this modern airplane is functioning properly, they're going to be just fine. Or on the other hand, you could put somebody who is, an ace pilot into an aircraft and it breaks, and they're going to be just fine because they're going to know what to do. The problem is when you put the person who doesn't know what they're doing into an airplane that is bound to break, and they're going to break.
Right.
Technology will break. I am sorry, it's going to happen. Then that's when we're going to have the problem, and those two meet up. And the longer we have this technology, these airplanes flying, the older they get, the chances something's going to happen, is very real. And during my research, there are some authors that stated it's kind of, kind of scary, but they said between 2020 and 2025, we are going to have an unprecedented set of airline accidents. And I'm going, okay, the public's going to go, why those years? Well, what's going on and I'm sure you've read of it, Next Gen. So Next Gen is a new generation technology where everything is getting just a little bit more, not a little bit more, a lot more automated.
That's correct.
And every time that you have a huge shift in technology or how we do things, error is going to happen. And it's part of the learning curve. It is what it is. And I'm thinking those are the years that they're really focusing, trying to get this in there. It's delayed a little bit. A lot of this is delayed because of terrorism, because they haven't grasped the security aspect of this highly automated technology, because technology can be hacked.
Well, that's where
that's another reason we need pilots in the airplane, right, in case it is.
But that's where we're headed, though, and cars. I showed a YouTube video to kids the other day in terms of technology, and around that same time frame, I think it's 2025, 2028, somewhere around there, we're going to have cars. I mean, they've already started with the car. They're testing those now, where you have cars that the driver doesn't have to drive. I said, now, for me personally, I'm not sitting in any car that's driving itself with me sitting in it. I said, if I'm going to be in the car, I'm going to be driving it. I'm not going to be sitting in any car that's driving itself. But you see it now in the auto industry. They have vacuum cleaners now that you can purchase that vacuum your floor for you on its own. You don't have to stand behind it. It'll just run around your floors on its own. So definitely it's there. I heard the other day that Amazon and other companies are going to be delivering packages through drones. They're gearing up for that. Last night I was at my RC Flyer Club meeting, and they were talking about the various news TV stations and radio stations. The drone will now go to the site.
We're going to have. I'll have to add a little segment in my kids' movie where we're going to have open hunting season on drones. You got to get your you got to go get your license before you can start taking them out.
But back to your point about the technology thing. I mean, anybody in the listening audience, you know what it feels like when Wi-Fi goes down. You know what it feels like whenever when you go to turn on your computer and it's not working, or you can't get online. You know that frustration you feel. We've gotten so accustomed to it. And what Karlene is getting at is you can have pilots so accustomed to technology that when it goes down or when it stops, because even with the best technology, and airplanes are built with a lot of redundancies in there. That's the way they're built. There's duplication of just about every system in it. Might be 2 or 3 or 4 times over. But at times, they do go down, and the technology will not turn it back on. It will have to be done manually. And you can get so lulled into just sitting there with the technology doing things and if you've never been trained on what to do if the technology goes out, you're up there 30, 40,000 feet trying to figure out what do I do next. And as she said, right, the plane can virtually, if it's programmed, because you can program your headings, you can program your directive. It's just a matter of turning the dial or punching in the numbers, and the plane will do what you tell it to do from that point on. You can start programming your altitude. You can program all of that, and the plane will do it on autopilot. But what happens when autopilot kicks off? Or you have a situation where the autopilot button has been bumped to go back to manual, and the pilot doesn't realize it. What happens? There's so many different scenarios that you need the human element. And so when you combine something like fatigue, somebody that's been flying for 20, 30 hours or what have you, or very little rest in between flights, when you combine that with being lulled by the technology, it's a very dangerous situation. And again, your average passenger is sitting back there, they have their, whatever the little food they serve or their drink, or they're sleeping or watching their movie. They're not thinking about that.
Right, and they shouldn't think about that.
Correct.
Because every time a passenger buys a ticket, there should be this implied, an implied warranty that they are going to have a safe trip from point A to point B. And that should be an assumption. That's a very valid assumption they should have, and we owe it to them. I mean, we really do. And here's the interesting thing, Mark, is because the problem is that the structure of these airlines, it's kind of fascinating, because when you talked a little bit about the different levels, and you've got the CEO and corporate level, think about a bubble, okay? And here's the flight ops bubble. And outside the flight ops bubble is corporate. And corporate's wonderful, and they go out and they do the marketing, and they show the big happy family. But what's happening inside the bubble is, this is flight ops, and all the management are pilots. Okay, and it started that way because the very first, when they first started this aviation business and flying passengers, the FAA said, you need to be type rated and trained on this airplane before you can be a chief pilot. And so what has evolved over the years is all you have to do to be legal to be an instructor or to be a manager or to be a chief pilot is just get a type rating, meaning you just go through the basic training. And if that basic training is very short, you may never even flown international. You've never flown this airplane. You just went through the training. Now you can manage. And so what I'm getting at is that we have a whole level of pilot managers out there. And this is not to say all of them, because some of them, we've got some really excellent people. But now they are also being bought because the structure is they're paying these guys so much money. And they do not want to give up that spot, because then they'd actually have to be away from home and go fly an airplane that they haven't been, thoroughly trained on. And so they're managing. These are the guys who are managing the system. Now, they don't necessarily have teaching experience. They don't necessarily have flight experience. They just have a type rating and positional power, and they're being paid a lot of money for that positional power. So they don't want to rock the boat and get kicked out of that job, And so they're going to be more apt to do what management says, or above them, or to make sure the numbers fit so they look really good to that corporation outside their little flight ops bubble. Now, the interesting thing is, because of technology, there's some fascinating ways we can train pilots that doesn't cost more money. And it's not that they don't know it. They don't understand just how we teach will improve the teaching. So instead of just giving a pilot a flash drive, this is a perfect example, giving a pilot a flash drive and say, go home and learn this airplane off your flash drive. We all have different learning modalities, as you know. Some are audio and some we need to read and some we need to discuss. But to really learn, we need feedback. And we need to understand that we're learning the right thing, and we need that. You're not going to get feedback from a flash drive, and you may be learning the wrong thing. First learn might be your first learn wrong. And so you're memorizing something without a real understanding, and it's wrong. So you never get that core foundation. The online school, I'm going to school at Embry-Riddle Worldwide, and they've got you go to a virtual classroom. You don't get a flash drive.
Right.
You go to a virtual classroom, and you're with industry experts and with other people around the world, and you're in these, and it's open 24/7. So you get to go to class, wherever in the world you are, jump in and start discussing issues. That technology has been established. Can you imagine if the airlines enabled that instead of that flash drive? So now I'm reading, sitting and trying to understand the hydraulic system, and I'm just memorizing stuff in this flash drive. And I got to do it all on my own. What if I had a virtual classroom for my airline that I could go in and say, hey, Mark, anybody in this classroom that's training the same way, I don't understand this, how the landing gear really works. What hydraulic system's doing this? What happens if we shear a line and lose the left engine? Is our gear going to come down? Something that they don't really understand the connection of this all. And you could open up a really good discussion, and then you could have the master instructor listening, and they could be coming over the top and going, yeah, guys, no, you're wrong. Here's how it really works.
Well, see, again, for your average Joe Q public, there are just some things that the expectation is not that it's learned through a flash drive. That's almost like saying a brain surgeon or a heart surgeon or a surgeon, a doctor, period, learned whatever would you go to a doctor that learned on a flash drive? That's what I'm saying. There's just certain industries that people are not expecting whoever's in charge of that or running that, or whoever's in your case piloting a plane, that's how they were taught. Because these are they're very hands-on. They're manual things. You have to do things manually with a plane, or if you're a surgeon, or if you're whatever. Some things you can get away with learning on flash drive. Then there's others that's not. And to me, flying a plane is not learned on flash drive. I don't see that. But again, I know that's a cost-cutting or a cost-saving measure. But like you just said, people learn different ways. All right, I memorized that, but that's reading, learning, and having to actually do it. That's different things. So I've read it, I've studied, I've memorized it, but I haven't actually tactile done it.
Yeah, and so we tactile do it in the simulator, but we don't connect. We don't connect understanding of, it's super. Let's put it this way: the flash drive is superficial learning of push a button, what this light says, and how it's going to, what it's going to tell you. It's not an understanding, and then you go in and you do your simulator training. But it's not connecting the two. We're not having an understanding of what happens when you push this button.
Right.
Why is it doing it? And what happens if you have this electrical failure? Why you do this? I'll tell you, it'd be fascinating to find out if we had an electrical failure on one of these automated aircraft and they didn't have their, what we call the emergency handbook, quick reference manual, or sometimes there's another, quick reference manual is one of them, or
right.
Oh, I can't think of the other name, but they don't have their little manual, their little guide. And so what happens if they don't have that? Would they be able to manage the system? And I hypothesize probably not. old school.
Well, see, again,
I
hypothesize probably not with you, because what I'm hearing is there's not a basic understanding of how the equipment in and of itself works. I know how to work the equipment, but I don't know how the equipment works.
Perfect statement, yeah.
That's what I'm hearing, and that's what's interesting. And for those of you listening, you know, with the goals of this show is to not only entertain, but to educate and inspire as well. And this morning's show, just like when I had the doctor on a couple of weeks ago, is more educational. And that's okay, because Karlene and I were talking for a couple of minutes before we went on the air. We really are trying to raise awareness. We're not trying to get you afraid of flying. That's not the issue. We don't need anybody that's afraid of flying. Oh, my God, I'm never going to fly again because the pilot. No. It's not that. But she is trying to make the industry aware of the ramifications of what could occur if we keep going down this road of relying so much on technology and the human element not necessarily knowing what to do if the technology goes down. Because it's kind of like I said earlier, as long as Wi-Fi and everything is great. But boy, when Wi-Fi goes down, everybody's like, what do I do now? When the computer goes down, like, oh, I don't know how to type on a manual typewriter. How do I get information? I don't know anything about an encyclopedia. I don't know anything about the card catalog. I don't know anything about how to get information any other way, because the only thing I've ever known is Google. So what happens when Google goes down? That's what she's pretty much saying. What happens in the flight deck when the technology, for whatever reason, stops working, or whatever system goes down, whether it's hydraulics, whether it's the electronics, the avionics, whatever. When they go down, do you know what to do? Because see, this is where I was using the calculator analogy. If you know the systems and how they work, and technology goes down, it's not that big of an issue. If you don't know how all the system works and technology goes down, that's where the issue comes in. And that's what I get the feel that you're really kind of advocating.
I am. And it's all about proactive safety. And here's something interesting for the readers to look up. SMS, Safety Management Systems. It's going to be mandated January 2018. Okay. So, and you have to have a very strong safety culture, which is reporting, learn, just, flexible, and informed. And I'll tell you what, if you know of anybody who is being retaliated in any industry, that because they're trying to push for safety, or, you know, if you see that, then you know that industry or that airline does not have a safety culture and will not support SMS. So it's kind of all lip service if we're not going to enable people to come forward if they see something going on. And when the readers read Flight for Sanity, they're going to see exactly what is happening from both sides of this, from the regulatory side to the safety side and proactive. We need to be proactive. You know, everyone should. We should always create our awareness and put it out. You know, you see a child running down the side of the freeway. I'm looking at that going, wait a minute, that kid's going to go in that freeway. We got to stop this behavior, you know, and somebody else will go, well, they've never run in the freeway before. Why are they going to do it now? So we're going to avoid it, you know, and then the kid gets killed on the freeway, and then the whole, and then, you know, and that's what happens traditionally in the airline industry. They wait till an accident happens. SMS is supposed to have risk mitigation put into place to prevent that accident from occurring so we can stop it. And that's why safety culture is so important, and why a reporting culture is so important, because the ground floor, the people who are behind the scenes, the people who are out educating themselves or out flying a line, or who, you know, can take their, you know, hey, I've got 10 kids at home and I know what these kids can get into, and I know how water and electricity works. That wire hanging by that pedal might not be a good idea, guys. Even though it hasn't happened yet, it's not a good idea. Those are the kind of things that we want to enable our entire employee force from any industry to be able to come forward comfortably and say, this could be a problem, I foresee this, and listen. And they may be wrong, you know, nobody's 100% right, but to listen to them and go, okay, let's look into this, but not retaliate. And I'll tell you what, the worst kind of retaliation is going on, and it's all written about in Flight for Sanity. And it's scary to the core what they're getting away with.
Well, she's right. It is in Flight for Sanity because I'm reading it. I've read all of the series and I'm almost done with Flight for Sanity. I'm maybe 50, 55, 60% through it. And it's when you're this is like David and Goliath. This is kind of like when you're dealing, or that old saying, you can't fight City Hall. But truth is, you can. But it's that same kind of thing. Like Goliath is big. Like the industry, whatever it is big. And then you have your advocates who are coming up against them. That's the Davids. And in some respects, and Khoyn, this is why the awareness is so important. Because in some respects, and in some of these entries are so large, I don't even know if they listen to John Q. Public or not. But in some respects, it's almost better for the public to be able to be the advocates than the person within the system, because it's kind of like that's just one of our disgruntled pilots. They're just trying to get back at the industry because they're disgruntled, as opposed to a group of people who are now pestering their congressmen and senators about this issue. So I think the more awareness that we have for the public, so they can start putting some pressure on lawmakers and the regulatory people, the stronger the fight will be. Because, in education, we always tell the parents, you know what, the powers that be will listen to you before they listen to me, because they think I'm just complaining because I don't want to do my job. I kind of see it as the same way. Probably the industry is saying, well, that's just a disgruntled pilot, or they can make it look like that. Even if that's not the case, they can set it up to make it look like that.
Absolutely. And Mark, that was the whole purpose from the very beginning, is to deal with all the industry issues, because I wanted the public awareness, and I need the public's help. I need their help. I need to help them. I need their help to help me, and read these and get an understanding. And I've got my email address in the books. People can get a hold of me, any questions they have, if they're passionate about this. But let's see, I talked with a lady, really fascinating gal, and she's an author, and she said, I'm smiling because you said this is a sexy industry. Well, you know what she said? She says safety is not sexy.
Right.
It's not sexy. Unless there's a crash, nobody wants to hear about it. And which was really a sad note, because we should all care about it. And there's, just we should, and we should have that compassion for people. That's another thing. During the research, not only the money, but the humanity, and what I am saying with the lack of integrity and conscience of people. It's amazing to me, because I knew it existed, but we all live in our world.
Right.
I know all that bad stuff happens out there. It doesn't come into my world, because my friends and my family and the people in my circle all are honest. They have integrity. We all make mistakes. We say things we shouldn't do. We apologize. We're human. But to have a total lack of ethics and integrity to do what these people are doing for that almighty dollar it's like somebody I'm sitting across the table for, and I'm going, how could this be happening? It's shocking to me. It's writing Flight for Sanity and doing the research on that book has been a true journey of faith.
If you ever want to read, and I recommend this book a lot, and I had her on the show a few years ago, but it's about the pharmaceutical industry, and she's kind of fighting the same fight you are with the aviation industry, with the pharmaceutical industry. Her name is Melody Peterson, and the book is called Our Daily Meds: How the Pharmaceutical Companies Transform Themselves. And she, the little blurb says, in the last 30 years, the big pharmaceutical companies have transformed themselves into marketing machines, selling dangerous medicines as if they were Coca-Cola or Cadillacs. I mean, that's kind of like the little blurb. But she's taking on kind of like that same fight. And that's why I was saying earlier, the very industries, perception-wise, that you would think is all about life really is not. And when I'm getting on a plane, I'm putting my total faith and confidence in, you're going to get me from New Jersey to Los Angeles. And I'm not going to give that a second thought, because I know you did. In terms of safety, I'm not going to think about that, because I know that's what you're doing. And when the truth of the matter is, it's not necessarily the case.
Right. But you can have faith and confidence that I'm not going to give up. And I'm going to keep pushing, and I'm going to keep learning and researching, and I will do whatever it takes. The next major airline accident that occurs is probably going to be the moment that I bring out all the details of what's really going on behind the scenes. And it's sad that we have to have an accident to create that awareness. I will get my PhD. I will keep pursuing this, no matter what happens.
Well, the interesting thing about any time an airline, because there's always an investigation, this we know, but it's always interesting to see how all the finger pointing between the airline industry, the aircraft maker, and how all of them, because I guess we know it's a litigious society in terms of lawsuits, again, back to the dollar. But it's always interesting to see when the investigation is done, who is going to really shoulder that blame? Is it pilot error? Was it equipment error? Was it this error? Was it that error? Is there any in one in particular, and I'm trying to see how to ask this question, that the industry favors? Which, if they had to have one, it to be in the blame of
aircraft manufacturers and airlines are pointing the finger at the pilot.
Right. That's what I kind of thought.
Sully.
Yes.
If Captain Sully did what they are purporting that he should have done and tried to turn to that airport, and he did that, and that airplane crashed and everybody died.
Right.
Pilot error.
Right.
And so what they were trying to blame him for, there's another fabulous book called Scapegoat. And it's on Hoot Gibson's story and what the FAA and NTSB, this poor man's life was destroyed. Entire career was destroyed because he saved the flight, and they wouldn't listen to him. He was he lived also, but they wouldn't listen to him. At least Sully was able to, Captain Sully was able to get in there and say the right things. And the only reason he was, I'm not going to give away, but everyone should go see that movie.
Oh, I saw, and that's what I had no idea that he went through what he went through until I saw the movie. I had no idea.
And that's powerful in itself, isn't it? I mean,
my wife and I watched it, and I sat there and I said, because, again, on TV, he's a hero, he's this, that, and that. Oh my God, he saved so many souls. And the back end, whenever the investigation came, I don't think most people knew how he was almost like brought up on criminal charges because of making that decision. And he steady telling them, him and the co-pilot steady telling them, no, that was not that you run simulation tests all you want. That wasn't the timing. That wasn't the parameters. And whenever they finally did input it the way that they said it happened, then even the master pilots in the simulator couldn't get it to do what they were trying to get it to do. But the fact that they even put him through that, I had no idea that he had gone through that backlash.
Oh, I know. You'll enjoy Scapegoat. You should read that book.
Oh,
that shows you what this industry is, and it's so easy to point the finger at the pilot. But you know what? Human error right now, who is really responsible? If a pilot has an accident, if airplane breaks or something occurs, who is really responsible? The pilot only knows what the pilot knows. If they have not been given the tools to deal, fully with an accident, then who's really responsible?
Right.
Because we could even reach out to the arm of the FAA if they're not doing their job and making sure that these airlines are doing what they're supposed to. But here's an interesting thing to think about. I'm going to probably push a little bit more about this into the next book, Flight for Justice, the novel I'm writing right now.
Flight for Justice. All right.
Yeah, but here's what's happening, because each airline has its own little regulatory body in their office in the region. And so what's going on now is these captains who are in the airline and working their way up in their little management office and not actually out flying, retire, and guess what their retirement job is? They go into the FAA office, and they are now overseeing the airline they just came from. It's just like, and I guess if that's not necessarily a bad model. If you had somebody who's creating change going on because they know the inside of what's going on, and they're going, okay, now I'm going to go to the FAA side because now I know what you're doing and I'm going to fix you. That's not the case, though. If that were the case, it'd probably be good.
Right.
But it's not. It's just get along and do it. So, yeah, here's, who's going to be liable. This is fascinating. So SMS, safety management systems, and we're getting on it really quick. And my husband keeps saying, how come we're not hearing about this in the news? And I'm like, because nobody really knows what it is. They're not educating. Therefore, how can it really be a mandate? But it is an FAA mandate. And so, but you know who's responsible now? The CEO. The CEO of an SMS system is fully liable. So you watch the first accident that occurs after 2018 is going to be that's going to be the first opportunity for somebody to go actually do a personal lawsuit against the CEO.
Wow.
Because it doesn't matter. You know, think about what happened at Wells Fargo.
Right.
With the bank, and that CEO, he ended up retiring. You know, he went away, but he was liable, even though, you know, they say, oh, how could a CEO be liable for an airline? It's too big, it's too vast. Well, you know, I'm sorry, you need to have processes in place to support safety, and there has to be one leader. You know, there has to be somebody who's making sure everybody's doing their pieces, and you can't be protected in your little, you know, bubble at the top because, because, oh, it's not my fault. Insurance will cover it. And you watch,
right.
Things are going to start changing because that's one of the things. CEOs, top management are responsible. And the structure is not supposed to be a big hierarchy. It's supposed to be a flat structure where there's communication and information and learning and sharing, and, you know, and it's all for proactive safety. So we're going to see a new world. You know, Mark, you know, my next adventure is after the PhD. I'm going to get my law degree.
Good for you.
I am. I am going to go get a law degree, and I am going to we're going to take this to the next level because the legality of, you know, we'll have to come and have a whole nother talk on the Railway Labor Act. Do you realize that because of the Railway Labor Act that was written and put in place 93 years ago, is protecting airlines, because as long as you have a pilot working agreement, a contract, so if you have a contract, you're not allowed as a pilot or an employee in that airline and railroad, you're not allowed to go take the airline to court. You have to go through the mediation process. And the mediation process is a kangaroo court because the 4 or 5 pilots who are on the board that are mediating whether the company did right or wrong are being paid extra by the company to be able to sit on that board.
Right.
So it's like a premium.
It's a conflict of interest for sure.
Oh, no kidding. And, you know, and so this, really, I'm going to get an amendment to that, because I think if there's any federal or state law that is being violated, and these airlines are violating federal and state law, and the employees are not allowed to go into outside court. They got to go through their little kangaroo court. And the airlines also control the timing of this. And I know an airline that has a contract that says if the issue is not resolved within 2 years, the airline automatically wins. Okay, how can that be? Because the airline controls the timing of this. And they're like,
they just keep filibustering, right? They'll always go past 2 years.
Oh my gosh. You know, and the funny thing is I really was just, my first book was on mental health and the condition of the airline, and I loved the passion and what's happening. And then I went to a new airplane, and I'm looking at training, and I'm thinking, holy cow, I think that I have enough for another 3 or 4 novels right now, and they just keep giving me more plot points for more novels. You know, so the public's going to get thoroughly entertained, but, you know, it'll be fun. We'll have to, when I'm about to write the nonfiction, when Dr. Pettit is about to write the nonfiction book on all this, we're going to run a huge contest and see how many people can go through these novels and figure out what they think is fact and what they think is fiction. Because I'll tell you, a lot of stuff, when I read the comments on Amazon, oh, that could never happen, you know, or this is more believable than that book because these things could never happen. And I'm just like laughing because thinking, oh no, sorry, everything in that book is true.
No, because a couple of years ago, or I guess it's been that long now, when the pilot committed suicide, that's what it was, I think, whenever I text you. When the pilot he flew the plane into the mountain. I was like, wow, this seems like something that was in your book.
Yeah, it was in my book 4 years earlier. And the thing is about that, the same thing that I'm doing now, but not on that level, which actually probably prompted me, is because I started a pilot assistant program at one of my airlines, and I was actively involved, and I got my master's in human services, and I was seeing what was going on with this industry, and I just thinking, come on, we need some protections. You know, we need to help our fellow human beings if they have a problem. because of the housing crisis. Think about this. Their airline goes bankrupt, or they merge with another airline. They lose their seniority. They're being forced to live in another base. They make too much to have their kids go to college,
right,
or to get help with college. They have to work more hours. The housing crisis at the time of all these bankruptcies prevents them from selling their house, so they have to commute across the country. They're commuting. They're fatigued.
Right.
They're gone more hours, and they're still barely making it meet. And it just builds. And I thought, we need to do something. We need to do something for our fellow human beings, because if nothing else, we care about them. And nobody was. Nobody was doing anything. And so I thought, I'm going to create a book. I'm going to write a book to create awareness on this very real subject. And, and granted, I had to put a sociopath in there to help spur this thing on. But that could be very real too. And I used real airline crashes, real incidents, the incidents that you go in and like Flight for Safety that we never heard about in the media. Well, when you go and read that book, they really did happen.
Right.
It's just being kept out of the media, and that's a whole other story, how the airlines are getting away with that one.
Right.
But we could be here for 5 hours or longer and go over this. But,
you're right. Because for me, and I think for many, it's a fascinating topic. And you're right. And since I always love the behind the scenes anyway. But again, I think it's a matter of awareness. And again, not to make anybody paranoid, like, oh my God, I'll never get on a flight again. No. It's really not about that. But it is to make you aware so that you can join the fight, so that you can make other people aware and continue it, so that things will change. Eventually, that things have to change, because you can't wait until you've lost X number of lives before somebody say, look, we got to do something about this, especially when somebody was raising the red flag before it happened. And that's what Flight for Control, Flight for Safety, Flight for Survival, Flight for Sanity, that's exactly what we do. Well, we are just about out of time. And Karlene, it's 25 degrees here, and it's probably 60, 70, or 80 where you are, because Karlene's actually sitting outside doing this interview. Man, that must be nice. I'm looking for those days. But I always turn the mic over again to the guest in terms of, because she also authors a wonderful blog. The blog is called Flight to Success. And I went through there, and I see you have all the people that were like Friday Flyers still listed. I saw my name still there. I was like, wow, I'm still listed here. And so
you are. And I need to update my other Friday. I keep adding Friday Flyers, but I got to go in and do. It's hard to write novels, work on a PhD, and spend time with your grandkids.
Exactly, so. I'm sure. But it is an interactive blog. Again, it's Flight to Success, and that is, and she'll tell you about it in a minute. But that's KarlenePetitt.blogspot.com. And any other way that folks can get in touch with you, how they can join the fight, any do they need to get in touch with their congressmen or senators or local politicians, or what is it folks need to do to help you with this, to help us?
Well, you know what? Right now, the movement's going to happen when I get that PhD. That's when we're going to have the power behind what I'm doing, and to really be able to have a voice. For right now, read the books, read them. And, and then the thing is they're really fun, and there's romance in them.
They really are.
Yeah. And, it's like, and I was told that I couldn't write a book for men and women and pilots and non-pilots, but I did it. And it's fun because the women are sorry guys, the women are the heroes in these books. I have to tell you, and they're good friends, and they're fun, and they're really fun reads. And so, if you read the books, leave comments on Amazon, and, just start talking to your congressman and voicing concern about this. The Flight for Sanity book, that one is the most recent one, is probably going to be the most important one, because if what the airlines are doing now to silence the people who are speaking out, and they are allowed to get away with it, then we're all in trouble.
Wow.
Because that's a scary thing. So read Flight for Sanity, and you'll understand what is happening and how they're preventing this. And leave comments. You can email me at karlene.petitt@gmail.com. Just got to get the T's in the right place. Petitt.
That's right.
That dot between my name. Yeah, and the support's going to be. Read the books, leave a comment on Amazon, and just keep in touch, as I will continue. There will be one more book called Flight for Justice. It'll be out next year. and it's kind of further investigation tagged on to what's happening right now, and it's literally appalling. It's like every day I shake my head and thinking, no, this cannot be in today's world, cannot, and it is, and it's scary because the scary thing is it could happen to anybody,
right?
Anyone, you know.
Again, the books
the
books are Flight for Control, Flight for Safety, Flight for Survival, Flight for Sanity. And again, as you said, and her name is Karlene, so with a K. Karlene. And as she said, get the T's in the right place, Petitt. And again, they are fun reads. I tell you, when I'm reading a book, I tend to pop people into the character play of usually people I've seen on TV or even some people I know personally. And like I sent to you, I see Darby as, I'm trying to think of her name on CNN. That's with Anderson Cooper. But I sent it to you. But that's who I see Darby in terms of the redhead. And she has that kind of crazy spirit like that one on CNN. But you connect with the characters. Let's put it that way. The issues are real, the drone issues. I mean, you could take a drone up high enough, it can get sucked into an airline engine. And, I have a little drone, so I know how high they go and how quick they go. High. You could easily be the cause for a plane coming down. I mean, that's an issue in itself, because I know you talked about the drone issue in there as well. So they are fun reads, and they're real reads, and they're current reads in terms of 2017. These are things that are really happening. All right. So, well, Karlene, enjoy the grandkids. I thank you for rising early, and I will definitely keep track of how everything is going. Good luck on your quest for the PhD. And we'll be in touch because, like I said, in terms of aviation and all that, you're kind of like my go-to.
All right, Mark, thank you so much. And I'd like to thank all the listeners for hanging with us this morning, too.
Yes, indeed. Well, I tell you what, have a wonderful day. And like I said, enjoy the grandkids.
Okay, thank you. You too.
All right, thanks. Take care.
Bye-bye.